Yeah.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about massive resistance and what that was all about?
Okay. First of all, I think earlier I said I was a Brown baby and I grew up during Brown. And I think that most people think that once a law is passed, me too, that people follow the law. Well, they didn't. So after, in 1954, 55, first there was Brown, then there was Brown 2 because people weren't really following the law. And they just resisted implementing any of the law what Brown had indicated. So it was in the state of Virginia. The state of Virginia resisted like other southern states. In fact, there was some point where by 1960 or so, there were only 2% of the African American or Negro population who was really integrated in school. They just did not do it. And so in Virginia, when after Brown, they not only did not do it, they just refused to implement it in a massive way. And so Senator Byrd worked along with the governor, and they came up with the law, and I think it's called Stanley's Law. You'd have to look that up, but I'm pretty sure it was a Stanley referendum, or not referendum, but it was called Stanley. And this particular element allowed people to not follow the law. In other words, Byrd said, rather than actually do it, we're going to do it massively. All of us will just not implement the law. But Virginia, although the other, South Carolina, all these other southern states resisted, they did not do it at the same level of intensity that Virginia. In Virginia, they decided in Prince Edward County that they would close the schools rather than allow their kids to go to school with African American kids. And so what they did, they closed the schools in Prince Edward County, and for 5 years. And it was like 1958, I think, until 5 years later, they refused to let their kids go to school. But they also passed some types of legislation that allowed white kids to get tuition and to go to what was referred to as the segregated academies. So the white kids went to these segregated academies. Black kids, in fact, there's something here recently, I know about a year ago, those African Americans who did not go to school for 5 years felt that they needed some type of compensation for the fact that they were not allowed to go to school for 5 years. So in Prince William County, Prince William County decided to do it a little differently. Prince William County, by mere fact of having these military bases, really helped them in the end. And what Prince William County decided to do under the guidance of Herb Saunders, they decided to, rather than integrate, they did have 1 or 2 African American students. In fact, one was at Garfield, and one, I think, was at Occoquan. But rather than integrate with the students, they integrated with teachers. And it really turned out what many consider to be a smart move, in that they took these 4 women, and Fannie Fitzgerald was one of them. They were in all these African American schools in Prince William County. They were working as teachers in those schools. So people like Fannie and these other 3 ladies were master teachers. And so she said that Herb Saunders showed up at her school, Jenny Dean. Jenny Dean was an all-black school. And said to her, no, it was Antioch Elementary. Antioch Elementary was also an all-black school. That's where Fannie worked. He came in one day and said, you're going to be going to Fred Lynn, which was an all-white school. And she said, when? He said, like, tomorrow. Yes. And Fannie said something like, well, I hope it's not going to be today, because I would like to go home and fix up. Because if you know Fannie, Fannie always looks good. And so they put her at Fred Lynn on back to school night. The reason it worked was because Fred Lynn was a school that had many of the military families. And because military families had traveled and worked in a more integrated situation, they were a lot more responsive to that type of thing. So rather than participate in the massive resistance in the same way that Prince Edward County, and believe it or not, Prince William never had all these, the National Guards and all those things. You know, you look back at all these other places in the South where they had to bring in a National Guard and all that. They didn't, because they decided to do it in a different way, but they were segregated for a long period of time. And Fanny did not. It was 1966 when Fanny went in. So, as the story goes, when I came in, I heard of her. I didn't know Fanny, but I knew she was like the black supervisor at Central. And suddenly I was in this position of being a black supervisor along with a guy named Russell Cooley. We were the only two African American supervisors there, and we were both in the same building. And I had heard of Fanny Fitzgerald. And when her daughter, Benita Fitzgerald, won the gold medal, and that was all over the news, I realized she's just a good person, because my contact with her, I was watching the parade, and Fanny Fitzgerald said, "Hey, Lillie, why don't you come sit with us?" Me and my husband. And I was like, I barely know this lady, but she has such a big heart, and so we got to know each other, and then we both joined First Mount Zion. And a friend, Denise McPhail, I met her through the Human Rights Office, because in spite of having high-performing schools, and I had applied for 3 positions at Central Office and never got those positions, and was considering whether or not I was going to take action. And Denise worked with the Human Rights Office, so I went down and talked to Denise, and she said, "You can do this, but you've got to think, Lillie, what's going to be the impact on your family?" And I decided no, I was not. And so I didn't. But Denise and Fanny went to First Mount Zion. And so I sat next to Fanny, and Fanny Fitzgerald said to me, several people at First Mount Zion said, "Why don't you join the choir? Why don't you join the women's choir?" And but Fanny Fitzgerald sat next to me one day, and she said, "You're going to join the choir." And I was like, "Well, I don't know, Fanny." And she said, "And by the way, you're a contralto. So, and you're going to stand next to me." And so we kind of formed this relationship. And Denise sent a note out one day and said, "My husband went to Antioch, and this new school is being built, and we would like to name it Fanny Fitzgerald, and I'm looking for somebody to help me with it." And I don't know. You know, I think that some things happen in our lives that are from us, but some other things are not. And this Fanny Fitzgerald thing for me was, I always knew that it didn't come from me, that it came from God, because it was like I was just put in these places that it was not until I started working on this Fanny Fitzgerald naming of the school that I realized that I was the black woman that replaced her at Central. That's 1971. And so I called Fanny, and I said, pretty much, it's your contralto friend calling you. And I said, "They're thinking about naming a school, and I'm willing to work on the project. Could you tell me your story?" And she just started to weep. And she said, "How much time do you have?" And I said, "I've got a lot of time." And she told me her story. And I thought, why haven't no one, all of this time, the story has been in Prince William County, but no one has brought it forth. And so Denise and I started working on the story and went to Dr. Torian and said we would like to get the church involved in this and pass out information. And he had pretty much had a policy of not letting big activities like this take place in the church. And so he said, you better know what you're doing to me, Lillie, Jessie. And I said something that I think, growing up in South Carolina and in the cotton fields of South Carolina, because I did that also, I always had this thing about if you're going to do something, go in to win. So I said, well, you know, Denise and I, if we go into the arena, we plan to win. But we didn't think we were concerned because there was another person, Dolores Hampton, who had done a great deal in the county, and we felt she was going to be the competition because she was also African American and had made many contacts politically and socially and had done tremendous things in the county. And we thought that was going to be the, but it turned out it was not. It was another young guy who was killed in a fire. He was a fireman and lost his life. He became the competition, not Dolores. But we pursued it, and it dawned on me that Fannie Fitzgerald, the site for Fannie Fitzgerald was on Benita Fitzgerald Drive. And yeah, talking about, wow. And so we went before the board, and the first reaction from Central was, and I was telling them about Fannie Fitzgerald, and I said I talked to her, and so my associate superintendent said,